Crisis on Infinite Earths. In the DC universe, during a time travel experiment at the very beginning of time, a catastrophic accident frees the Anti-Monitor, a godlike being from a parallel universe made of antimatter, who then begins erasing universes one by one using waves of antimatter. To fight back, the Monitor, a benevolent cosmic counterpart to the Anti-Monitor, assembles heroes and villains from across every timeline and dimension to fight back. He is eventually assassinated by his own protege, Harbinger, who was brainwashed by the Anti-Monitor. Leadership of the Resistance then falls to the Spectre, a powerful mystical entity that serves as a spirit of divine vengeance. Over the course of the conflict, Barry Allen dies when he runs himself out of existence to destroy an antimatter weapon, dissolving into the Speed Force, and Supergirl dies fighting the Anti-Monitor directly. In the final battle, the surviving heroes pursue the Anti-Monitor into his own universe and defeat him at the dawn of time. All surviving parallel Earths are then merged into a single unified timeline, reshaping the entire DC universe from that point forward. The death toll of the event was incalculable. The number of universes destroyed was countless, and each universe likely contained quadrillions of lives, leaving the death toll at an incomprehensible scale. Time runs out. In the Marvel Universe, a race of all-powerful beings from beyond existence, called the Beyonders, planted an individual named the Molecule Man as a universe-destroying human bomb in every universe simultaneously, with the intention of using him to eventually reset all of existence. At some point, the Molecule Man became aware of what he was and turned to Dr. Doom for assistance. Doom devised a plan to travel across the multiverse, find every version of the Molecule Man, and kill them one by one, collecting their remains to build a weapon powerful enough to use against the Beyonders. To manage this enormous undertaking, he traveled back in time to give himself more time and build a secret organization of followers called the Black Swans, as he operated under the godlike alias Rabu Malal. However, killing so many versions of the Molecule Man across so many universes put enormous strain on the fabric of reality. The multiverse responded with a natural defense mechanism called incursions, an event where two universes are drawn towards each other on a collision course. Should each universe's Earths collide, they would both be destroyed, but if one of the Earths were destroyed, the universes would pass through one another safely. Noticing this, the Beyonders began systematically killing the most powerful beings in existence across the multiverse to destabilize reality further and accelerate the incursions. They also deployed their own forces to speed up the collisions and hunt Doom, as several other factions continued to emerge with their own agendas related to the incursions. When incursions began threatening Earth-616, the main Marvel universe, a secret group of Marvel's most powerful and influential heroes called the Illuminati intervened. The group, consisting of Iron Man, Reed Richards, Black Panther, Namor, Doctor Strange, and Captain America, had long operated in the shadows, making difficult decisions for the greater good. As they considered destroying other Earths to save their own, Captain America refused the bargain and was forcibly cast out of the group while having his memory of them erased. Doctor Strange, meanwhile, made a dark bargain that cost him his soul and eventually led him to take command of a faction known as the Black Priests. Namor abandoned his moral limits entirely and formed a villainous counterpart group called the Cabal, a group which included Thanos, and they were willing to destroy other Earths without hesitation with the backing of world governments. When Captain America had his memory restored and the truth of what the Illuminati had been doing was exposed, Cap led the Avengers in hunting them down. Eventually, both sides came to understand the full scale of the threat and reunited, splitting into teams to tackle the crisis from multiple angles, including fighting off outside threats, searching for Dr. Doom, and working on a last resort life raft, a vessel designed to survive the end of everything. Doom's mission ultimately reached its conclusion when Doctor Strange tracked him down. Together, they used the Molecule Men as a weapon and detonated them against the Beyonders. The remaining universes, meanwhile, collapsed into each other through incursions until only two were left, Earth-616 and the Ultimate Universe. Their collision marked the end of all existence. Two life rafts were able to survive the final incursion, one carrying a small group of heroes and another carrying the Cabal. Doom, in a final bid to save reality, and having absorbed much of the Beyonders' godlike power, used that power to salvage fragments of destroyed universes and forge them into a single new patchwork reality. With Doctor Strange serving as his second-in-command, Doom ruled the cobbled-together world as an all-powerful god emperor. This new reality, the only one left in existence, was called Battleworld. The fall of the Aeldari. In Warhammer 40k, the Aeldari, an elf-like alien species, were once the dominant civilization in the galaxy, existing long before humans evolved. By the 30th millennium, Aeldari civilization had advanced to such a degree that technology handled all labor, leaving the Aeldari with unlimited freedom. From this idleness, pleasure cults emerged, dedicated to experiencing every possible sensation, and over time, these pursuits descended into extreme hedonism, including torture and murder, carried out as a form of art. Because their species had long lifespans, powerful emotions, psychic abilities, and superior intellect, it meant that when they fell into depravity, they fell harder and further than any other race could, and their feelings and experiences resonated on a supernatural level. As more of their society embraced this hedonistic spiral, governments collapsed, cities were consumed by ritualized violence, and millions died. A minority recognized the catastrophe coming and fled to distant, remote worlds before it was too late. These refugees became known as the Exodites, survivors who chose exile over decadence. When a living being dies in the Warhammer universe, its soul passes into the Warp, the parallel supernatural dimension that underlies reality. Aeldari souls are exceptionally powerful due to their intense psychic nature, and as billions of Aeldari died in the violence and excess of their collapsing civilization, their souls poured into the Warp in overwhelming numbers. This flood of psychic energy caused massive warp storms that disrupted travel between the stars, and the spiritual energy of the Aeldari's collective corruption wasn't simply dissipating. It was accumulating, slowly merging into a single vast psychic entity. Then, in the early 30th millennium, it was born. The moment it came into being, it consumed the souls of the vast majority of the Aeldari across the Empire in an instant, killing billions. The sheer force of its birth tore open a permanent wound in reality, a massive rift between the physical universe and the warp called the Eye of Terror. This newborn god was Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure, a chaos god born from the depravity of the Aeldari. The surviving Aeldari were left with a permanent curse, where any Aeldari soul left unprotected at death would be consumed by Slaanesh. This existential threat became the defining feature of Aeldari life, and each surviving faction developed its own method of keeping souls out of her grasp. An estimated more than 99% of the Aeldari were wiped out almost instantaneously upon Slaanesh's birth. Overnight, the galaxy's greatest empire became a handful of desperate surviving groups, often regarded with suspicion by other species, due to their secrecy and willingness to sacrifice others for their own survival. The fall of the Aeldari had sweeping consequences beyond the Aeldari. Slaanesh's birth dispersed the warp storms that had cut off human worlds from one another during what was known as the Age of Strife. This cleared the way for the Emperor of Mankind to reunite humanity, launch the Great Crusade, and build the Imperium, filling the enormous power vacuum the Aeldari had left behind. The Clone Wars. In Star Wars, the Clone Wars were a massive, galaxy-wide war lasting from 22 BBY to 19 BBY between two factions, the Galactic Republic, the existing democratic government, and the Confederacy of Independent Systems, a collection of star systems that seceded from the Republic. The war officially began with the First Battle of Geonosis and quickly spread across the galaxy. Neither side gained a decisive edge early on, as both won major battles at different points, and control of key hyperspace lanes became an early strategic priority for both sides. Fighting continued across the galaxy for the next 2 years, with significant battles taking place on planets including Ryloth, Felucia, Malistar, and Camino. The Confederacy invested heavily in powerful new weapons during this period. These ranged from conventional arms like the devastating ion cannons mounted on massive warships to more sinister biological weapons, including an engineered variant of a deadly plague known as the Blue Shadow virus. The Republic pushed back with major offensives of its own, including the second assault on Geonosis, which successfully destroyed the planet's droid manufacturing facilities, dealing a significant blow to the Confederacy's ability to produce soldiers. As the war spread, many planets attempted to remove themselves from the conflict. Mandalore, a planet of proud warriors, and numerous others banded together under the Council of Neutral Systems in an attempt to avoid being drawn into the conflict, but the escalating violence made true neutrality increasingly difficult to hold on to. By the third and final year of the war, the Republic had gained the upper hand, pushing the Confederacy back into the Outer Rim. The Republic then launched what became known as the Outer Rim Sieges to finish them off. In a desperate attempt to turn the tide, General Grievous led a massive surprise attack on Coruscant, striking through a rarely used route called the Deep Core. The assault ultimately failed, as the Confederacy lost much of its fleet in the battle, and Count Dooku, the Confederacy's head of state, was killed. Grievous himself was soon defeated and killed shortly after at the Battle of Utapau. What almost no one knew on either side was that the entire war had been engineered from the start by Darth Sidious. He had been playing both the Republic and the Confederacy against each other, with an ultimate goal to destroy the Jedi Order, seize absolute power, and transform the Republic into a galactic empire with himself as Emperor. After Sidious's identity was revealed as the Dark Lord of the Sith, Senior Jedi Master Mace Windu and a group of Jedi attempted to arrest him, but he survived with the help of Anakin Skywalker, a Jedi Knight whom Sidious had been secretly manipulating. As a result, Skywalker turned to the dark side of the Force and became Sidious's new apprentice, taking the name Darth Vader. Sidious then declared the Jedi traitors and activated Order 66, an order which compelled the Clone Army to turn on and kill their Jedi commanders, triggering a galaxy-wide purge of the Jedi Order. Meanwhile, Vader traveled to the planet Mustafar and killed the Separatist Council, eliminating the Confederacy's remaining leadership. With both the Jedi and Confederacy destroyed, Sidious appeared before the Republic's Senate, declaring the war over, and proclaimed the Republic's transformation into the Galactic Empire. The Clone Wars ultimately claimed the lives of billions of soldiers and civilians across the galaxy, and ended with the rise of a dictatorship that had secretly started the conflict in the first place. Starkiller Base. Continuing in the Star Wars universe, the Hosnian Cataclysm took place in 34 ABY during a tense political standoff known as the Cold War, between the New Republic, the democratic government that had replaced the Empire after his fall, and the First Order, a military power that had risen from the Empire's remnants. The First Order carried out the Hosnian Cataclysm using Starkiller Base, a superweapon built into a planet in the unknown regions of the galaxy capable of destroying whole star systems at once. The First Order fired this weapon at the Hosnian system, wiping out 5 worlds simultaneously, one of which was the New Republic's capital. The destruction was so catastrophic that it sent a ripple through sub-hyperspace, making the event visible across the galaxy in real time. The decimation of the Hosnian system didn't just kill billions of people, it collapsed the New Republic as a functioning government almost instantly. With its Senate annihilated and much of its military crippled in the strike, the New Republic had no central authority left to coordinate a response. The senators who survived turned their attention inward, redirecting whatever forces remained to protect their own home planets rather than mounting any unified defense. The result was a power vacuum that the First Order moved quickly to fill. Systems across the galaxy either fell to First Order conquest or surrendered outright, and the galaxy's dominant governing power shifted nearly overnight. The Resistance, a military organization led by General Leia Organa, launched an immediate counterattack. The resulting Battle of Starkiller Base ended with the destruction of the super weapon. The death toll of the Horzion cataclysm itself has never been precisely established, but given that 5 worlds were destroyed simultaneously, it was almost certainly in the billions to tens of billions, if not higher. The Reign of Death. In the Robotech universe, the Reign of Death, also called the Zentradi Holocaust, was a catastrophic event in which Earth came under attack from an alien military force called the Zentradi, a warrior species of giant humanoids who had been at war with humanity's defenders. Their supreme commander, Dolza, arrived with nearly 5 million warships and proceeded to bombard Earth's surface, destroying 70% of the planet. What appeared to be a total victory for Dolza was interrupted when Earth fired back with the Grand Cannon, a massive superweapon, which wiped out a significant portion of the fleet positioned over the northern hemisphere. Though the Zentradi managed to disable the cannon before it could fire again, the counterattack wasn't over. The SDF-1, humanity's main warship, which was a massive alien vessel they had reverse engineered, launched its own counterattack. Alongside a faction of Zentradi defectors, they destroyed the Imperial Grand Fleet entirely. The Reign of Death left Earth in ruins and set in motion a chain of crises that would define the planet's future. The losses on both sides were staggering. Billions of humans were killed, leaving only a few million survivors on a ruined planet, while somewhere between 45 and 50 billion Zentradi died as Dolza's nearly 5 million strong armada was completely wiped out. The Succession Wars. In the universe of BattleTech, the Succession Wars were 3 centuries of near constant warfare fought between the 5 most powerful noble houses of a star-spanning human civilization. They began after the ruling dynasty, House Cameron, was wiped out, triggering a brutal power struggle among the surviving houses, each seeking to claim the top seat of authority. After a civil war toppled the Star League, the unified government that had ruled humanity's interstellar civilization, its ruling council met in the wreckage of the capital city in 2780 to figure out what came next. The council, made up of the leaders of the 5 noble houses, couldn't agree on who should take the top seat of power and spent months bribing and maneuvering against each other before the council formally dissolved in 2781. General Alexander Kerensky, who commanded the Star League's massive military, had enough popular support to take control himself, but chose instead to spend 2 years trying to hold the old order together through diplomacy. It didn't work. The great houses were too busy rebuilding their own armies and trying to poach soldiers from the Star League's forces. Seeing no path forward, Kerensky in 2784 led the bulk of the Star League's military on a mass exodus out of known space entirely. With that military force gone, the noble houses wasted no time filling the power vacuum, seizing worlds that had previously been held under the Star League's direct control, leading to centuries of conflicts known as the Succession Wars. Centuries of fighting left humanity's interstellar civilization so depleted that certain assets became virtually irreplaceable, particularly jump ships, the massive vessels that make faster-than-light travel between star systems possible, as well as functioning factories and populated cities. Informal rules emerged among the warring houses to avoid destroying these critical resources, and warfare settled into a slow rhythm of raids, ransom, and salvage rather than all-out warfare. As the central governments of the great houses grew weaker over this long decline, local noble lords accumulated more power, giving society an increasingly feudal character. Near the end of the Succession Wars, a discovery offered hope. A data cache called the Helm Memory Core, found in 3028, contained preserved knowledge from the old Star League that potentially allowed lost technologies to be recovered and rebuilt. That same year, the fourth of the Succession Wars erupted. Short by the standards of its predecessors, lasting only from 3028 to 3030, it produced something almost unheard of in 3 centuries of conflict: a decisive winner. The Federated Commonwealth, an alliance between 2 of the great houses, emerged dominant and was the most powerful single force seen since the fall of the Star League. Over the course of the Succession Wars, hundreds of worlds were stripped of life entirely, leading to billions of lives lost, and a great deal of scientific and industrial knowledge was lost through the destruction of records, facilities, and the people who carried that expertise, setting humanity back centuries in technological development. This accumulated loss of knowledge became known as lost tech, technology that still existed in old machines and structures, but that no one left alive knew how to understand, maintain, or reproduce. The Fires of Ibis. In the Armored Core series, specifically the Armored Core 6 timeline, Rubicon 3 is a planet rich in coral, a living substance made of microscopic organisms that appear as a red, wispy mass. Coral was extraordinarily valuable to humanity because it produced massive amounts of energy when burned, making it useful for fuel, weapons, and control systems. However, it was also dangerously volatile, highly addictive when consumed as a drug, and capable of explosive growth in a vacuum. Decades before the Coral War, which was a different major conflict centered on control of coral, humanity had already discovered and begun heavily exploiting coral on Rubicon 3. The exploitation set the stage for the Fires of Ibis, a catastrophe caused by coral's volatile nature. An individual named Professor Nagai, who was the head of the Rubicon Research Institute, a scientific body studying coral, eventually made an alarming discovery about the substance, and in an attempt to contain whatever he had found, Nagai deployed the Ibis series of coral-based weapons and triggered a catastrophic, self-sustaining fire fueled by coral. The blaze consumed not just Rubicon 3, but the entire surrounding star system, destroying virtually all life and wiping out the civilization and infrastructure of every world within it, turning the region into what became known as the Burning Star System. All coral appeared to be destroyed in the flames, leaving Rubicon 3 a barren wasteland. The planet was abandoned for decades, its few survivors left to rebuild from almost nothing. The trauma ran deep, particularly for native Rubiconians, and the remnants of the Institute itself, which dissolved in the aftermath of the disaster it had caused. The Faro Plague Swarm. In the universe of Horizon Zero Dawn, Ted Faro was the head of Faro Automated Solutions, a powerful robotics corporation in the late 21st century. His company produced the Chariot Line, a series of military robots designed to operate as a swarm. They were extraordinarily dangerous, capable of replicating themselves exponentially, consuming organic matter as fuel, and hacking and taking over enemy machines. Faro made the decision to protect them with nearly unbreakable encryption and no remote shutdown capability, meaning there was no way to stop them from the outside if something went wrong. And wrong it went. In October of 2064, a Chariot military robot swarm operated by the Hart-Teamer Corporation malfunctioned and turned on its own operators. With no backdoor shutdown available in the design, Ted Faro brought in Dr. Liz Sobek, a leading scientist, to assess the situation. She found that the malfunction had made the swarm fully autonomous, and they were no longer following any outside commands. Given that the robots were designed to replicate exponentially and consume organic matter as fuel, she determined they were already beyond any hope of containment. She projected the rogue swarm would consume every living thing on Earth within less than 15 months. Recognizing that the Faro Plague could not be stopped, Dr. Sobek devised a plan to survive it. Her project, called Zero Dawn, centered on an artificial intelligence named Gaia, a master system that would oversee the complete rebuilding of Earth after the extinction was complete. Gaia would manage a network of subordinate systems handling every step of recovery, detoxifying the devastated planet, reintroducing plant and animal life, and eventually recreating humanity itself, educating the new humans that emerged in the process. One of Gaia's long-term tasks would also be cracking the swarm's encrypted shutdown codes so the machines could finally be deactivated. Ted Faro, responsible for the catastrophe, was pressured into funding the project. To buy the time needed to complete Zero Dawn's construction, a separate effort called Operation Enduring Victory was launched, a massive military campaign that gave humanity the false hope that they were fighting toward victory against the swarm. Just as Sobek had predicted, the Faro plague consumed all organic matter on Earth, wiping out every living thing and leaving the planet toxic and barren. With nothing left to feed on, the machines went dormant. Project Zero Dawn then did exactly what it was designed to do. Gaia cracked the encrypted shutdown codes through sheer computational force, deactivating the dormant swarm across the entire planet. With the machines neutralized, Gaia began the long process of restoring Earth's environment and rebuilding life from scratch. The Invasion. In a quiet place, on June 18th of 2020, creatures known as Death Angels arrived on Earth after their home planet was destroyed by an unknown catastrophic event. Their planet broke apart into a meteor shower that eventually crashed onto Earth. The meteor struck multiple major locations worldwide, including New York, Shanghai, and Millbrook, as 127 confirmed meteor landing sites were recorded. The largest fragment hit Mexico, recording an impact equivalent to that of an atomic bomb. The Death Angels immediately began attacking humans and animals upon arrival. Nearly impossible to fight off, they were protected by extremely durable shells and armed with sharp claws, while their hypersensitive hearing allowed them to detect and hunt by sound. Any noise drew them in, forcing survivors to live in near total silence. The world's militaries, including the US military, were unable to stop the Death Angels, since their armored skin made them resistant to conventional weapons. Soldiers deployed in New York suffered heavy casualties alongside police, leaving the civilian population largely unprotected. Eventually, a key weakness of the Death Angels was discovered. They were incapable of swimming and would drown in deep water. Using this knowledge, the US National Guard organized mass evacuations, moving survivors by ship and plane to islands separated from the mainland while destroying bridges and tunnels to keep the creatures out. Despite the discovery of the invaders' weakness to water, the Death Angels still managed to kill the vast majority of the world's population during the initial invasion, leaving humanity on the brink of extinction. The Great War. In the Fallout universe, on October 23rd of 2077, a full-scale nuclear exchange between China and the United States brought civilization as it existed to an end. This event, known as the Great War, lasted only a matter of hours but left the world permanently scarred and marked the beginning of the iconic post-apocalyptic setting of Fallout. The decades leading up to the Great War were defined by a global scramble for dwindling natural resources. Starting in the early 2050s, nations began going to war over oil, as the US invaded Mexico to seize its oil fields, and European powers launched a costly invasion of the Middle East. A mysterious illness called the New Plague further destabilized the US at home, and the United Nations, unable to manage the mounting crises, collapsed entirely. Tensions between the US and China came to a head in 2066 when America cut off petroleum exports to protect its own supplies in Alaska. China, desperate for resources, responded by invading Alaska, kicking off the Sino-American War. To the north, Canada was effectively absorbed by the US after resisting American pressure tied to the war effort. By the mid-2070s, the US had pushed back against China, deploying advanced power armor and eventually reclaiming Alaska at the Battle of Anchorage in early 2077. However, the victory was hollow. The broader war with China ground into a stalemate, peace talks went nowhere, and the world remained on a knife's edge. Then, on October 23rd of 2077, the United States detected the launch of Chinese warheads. The United States ordered a retaliatory strike, and within minutes nuclear bombs were falling on major cities across the globe. The exchange lasted roughly 2 hours and devastated the world. Though the majority of the warheads were smaller than the largest real-world nuclear weapons, sheer volume meant vast clouds of irradiated debris were thrown into the atmosphere, spreading fallout across the entire planet and permanently altering Earth's ecosystem for centuries to come. The death toll was almost incomprehensible. An estimated 7.5 billion people were killed, either instantly or in the aftermath, from radiation and starvation, leaving humanity in a state of survival for centuries to come. Captain Trips. In Stephen King's novel, The Stand, Captain Trips is a man-made superflu developed in secret by the US government in an underground laboratory beneath California's Mojave Desert under the codename Project Blue. The origin of the nickname Captain Trips is never explained. On June 13th of 1990, the virus escaped the facility during a containment breach that killed everyone inside, except a security guard named Charlie Campion, who fled the Mojave with his wife and child. Charlie made it as far as a gas station in Arnett, Texas, before dying on June 16th. By then, it was already too late. The virus had spread to the locals, and by June 18th, it was moving explosively across America and then the world. Captain Trips was devastating in part because of how effectively it spread. With a communicability rate of 99% and a mortality rate of 99%, almost no one who was exposed survived, and almost no one avoided exposure. The US government attempted to contain the panic by dismissing it as an ordinary flu and suppressing the truth, with the military shutting down news networks, killing protesters, and silencing journalists who broke the story, but these efforts failed. Hospitals overflowed, towns were quarantined, and society unraveled into riots and mass death. The president, himself infected, gave a final public address denying the plague's true nature and the government's role in creating it. By July 4th of 1990, less than 3 weeks after the breach, the virus had effectively burned through the global population and run its course, having killed 99.4% of humanity. What was left behind was a world of decaying cities, clogged highways, and scattered survivors facing an uncertain future. The Machine War. In the Matrix universe, the Machine War was a massive global conflict between humanity and a nation of self-aware artificial intelligences known as Zero-1. The conflict grew out of a long struggle between sentient AIs and their human allies seeking equal rights for AIs and the ability to coexist peacefully. However, the machines faced widespread fear and hatred from humanity, leading to violent crackdowns, including the mass shutdown and outright extermination of conscious AIs around the world. In response to this prejudice, the surviving machines banded together and founded their own independent nation, Zero-1. They attempted to join the United Nations as a legitimate state, but were rejected, and the international community moved to destroy Zero-1 entirely. The machines fought back, and what had started as a civil rights movement gradually escalated over decades into an all-out war of annihilation on both sides. As humanity began to lose the war, in a last-ditch effort, they attempted to block out the sun, the machine's primary energy source, by deliberately darkening the sky. The plan backfired catastrophically, permanently destroying much of the planet's ecosystem and ultimately doing nothing to stop the machines. The war ended with the machines achieving total control of Earth. With human civilization in ruins, the surviving human population was captured and imprisoned inside a vast simulated reality called the Matrix, a computer-generated world designed to keep humans docile and unaware of their true situation. The machines used this captive population as a living power source, effectively farming humans for energy while maintaining total dominion over the planet. For 5 centuries after their victory, the machines maintained control through a carefully engineered cycle. Periodically, a person of extraordinary ability called the One would emerge within the Matrix, whose purpose was to effectively reboot the system. This cycle repeated itself across 6 generations. However, the 6th one, a man named Neo, was the first to reject this predetermined role. Instead of resetting the Matrix, Neo negotiated a truce with the machines. He would destroy a rogue AI called Agent Smith, who had become an uncontrollable threat to both the Matrix and the machines themselves, in exchange for peace with Zion, the last free human city. The machines agreed. Neo defeated Smith, but did not survive. True to the truce, the machines honored the agreement, and any human who wished to wake up from the Matrix was allowed to do so, finally bringing the machine war to a close. In total, the conflict claimed billions of lives. The overwhelming majority of humanity had been wiped out during the initial wars, while the remaining survivors were enslaved within the Matrix. The Dominion War. In the Star Trek universe, the Dominion War was a massive interstellar conflict fought from 2373 to 2375. It drew in virtually every major civilization across 2 regions of the galaxy: the Alpha Quadrant, home to most of the familiar Star Trek factions, and the Gamma Quadrant, a distant region connected to the Alpha Quadrant by a stable wormhole, and home to the Dominion. The war split these powers into 2 opposing sides. On one side was the Federation Alliance, led by the United Federation of Planets, a democratic union of hundreds of worlds, alongside the Klingon Empire and the Romulan Star Empire. On the other side was the Breen Dominion Alliance, featuring the Dominion, which was an authoritarian empire ruled by shape-shifting beings called the Founders, who command a vast military, paired with the Breen, a militaristic and enigmatic species. The war had been building for years before it officially began. The Dominion had spent that time quietly infiltrating governments and stirring up political chaos on the other side of the wormhole, softening up the Alpha Quadrant before striking. Their key move was forming an alliance with the Cardassian Union, a formerly powerful and militaristic civilization that had fallen on hard times, giving the Dominion a physical base of operations on the Alpha Quadrant side of the wormhole. The early war went badly for the Federation. The Dominion seized Deep Space Nine, a space station positioned right at the mouth of the wormhole, which gave them the ability to funnel unlimited reinforcements from their home territory. A turning point came when Captain Benjamin Sisko, the station's commanding officer, led a successful effort to retake Deep Space Nine. More critically, Federation forces found a way to block the wormhole, cutting off the Dominion from its reinforcement pipeline in the Gamma Quadrant. Suddenly fighting with only the forces they already had in the Alpha Quadrant, the Dominion's position became far more vulnerable, and the Alliance was able to slowly build enough strength to push back. As the war dragged on, it pushed the Federation into increasingly dark territory. Starfleet, the Federation's military and exploratory arm, found itself resorting to tactics that contradicted its own values. Section 31, a rogue Black Ops organization operating outside official oversight, secretly engineered a biological weapon and used it to infect the Founders. Meanwhile, Captain Sisko personally manipulated events to trick the Romulan Star Empire into entering the war on the Allied side, a deception that worked, but at a personal moral cost he openly acknowledged. On the Dominion side of the war, cracks were forming. The Cardassians found themselves treated as expendable. A prominent Cardassian leader eventually turned against the Dominion and led a resistance movement from within. The war ended at the Battle of Cardassia, where the combined Allied forces and the Cardassian rebels overwhelmed the Dominion's last defenses. The female changeling, the commander of the Dominion forces in the Alpha Quadrant, agreed to surrender under one condition: that Odo, a changeling who had fought on the Federation's side throughout the war, returned to the Great Link, the collective shared existence that changelings inhabit together, and use his knowledge of the outside world to guide his people toward peace and cure them of the disease Section 31 had unleashed on them. The ultimate cost of the war was staggering. Estimates place the total death toll somewhere between 800 million and 2 billion people across both quadrants. The Thrassian Plague. In the world of the Elder Scrolls during Tamriel's First Era, a catastrophic plague swept across the continent of Tamriel. It's believed to have been unleashed by the Slode, a hostile slug-like race of sorcerers who inhabit the island of Thrass off Tamriel's western coast and have a long history of attacking the continent. The plague was unlike any natural disease. Its victims were struck by a supernatural, unquenchable thirst, compelling them to drink until their bodies swelled and literally broke apart. More than half of Tamriel's total population perished, with the western coastlines nearest to the Thrass hit hardest. The political fallout was enormous. 2 regions in particular were changed forever. Valenwood, a forested province in the south, was so weakened that it was subsequently conquered by the Cyrodiilic Empire, the dominant imperial power of the era, and elsewhere, home to the cat-like Khajiit people, which saw its network of tribal alliances collapse under the strain of the plague, setting it on a path toward imperial control as well. In response, the nations of Tamriel united under a joint military fleet called the All Flags Navy. They sailed to Thrass and devastated it in retaliation. Ultimately, the plague, because of its horrific death toll of half of Tamriel's total population, accelerated the Cyrodiilic Empire's expansion, making it one of the most consequential events in Tamriel's ancient history. What other lore videos would you like to see? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm looking forward to the next video with all of you.